I'm Callan Whitmore, 31 and event planner from Silverfield. I spent years doing everything right, quietly supporting my family, giving without being asked, never expecting anything back. Then came my brother's wedding. I paid over $22,000 to make it perfect. And the next morning, I found out my mother had stolen $8,400 more from my personal account. That was the day I stopped being their silent helper. I became someone they couldn't ignore. Before I share how I took back my voice and my future, tell me, have you ever given too much to family who gave nothing back? Leave a comment, hit like if this feels familiar, and stay with me. This story ends differently. I grew up in a house with tall windows, silent staircases, and expectations that never had to be said out loud, because they were everywhere, stitched into the walls like wallpaper you weren't allowed to peel back. My parents, George and Elaine Whitmore, ran one of the most established real estate firms in Portland. Whitmore and Carter had their name etched into cornerstones of high-rise buildings across the city, the kind of legacy people spoke about at charity auctions and dinner galas. But inside our home, the power wasn't just in business deals. It was in glances, in quiet corrections, in who got listened to, and who got gently, politely, ignored. My younger brother, Tyler, was always the centerpiece. From the day he was born, you could feel the shift. I was 5 when he arrived, old enough to sense the change, too young to explain it. Everyone said things like he's the future of the company, even when he was still in grade school. They bought him tiny suits and let him sit at the head of the table during Sunday brunches. Just to get used to it, they said. When I brought home perfect report cards, the response was a soft, "That's nice, sweetheart," when he passed algebra on his second try. They celebrated with dinner at the Bramble. I learned early praise is proportional to potential. And mine, apparently, had limits. My role was clear: be presentable, be pleasant, don't talk too much. I wasn't expected to negotiate contracts or close development deals. I was expected to plan tasteful dinner parties, support my brother, and someday marry someone compatible with the Whitmore name. My mother used to say that a woman's greatest strength was her grace under pressure. But what she meant was know your place, and don't embarrass the family. Even my bedroom never quite felt like mine. Pale lavender walls, white linen curtains, and a vanity I never asked for. All chosen by my mother before I turned 13. I remember asking once if I could repaint it navy. She smiled and said navy was too serious, too heavy for a girl like me. I didn't argue, I just stopped asking. Still, I tried to matter. I joined debate in high school, earned honors, got into Reed College with a scholarship, and graduated with a degree in business. I thought that would earn me a seat at the table, or at least a bit of space to breathe. But at Whitmore and Carter, my ideas were brushed aside, my presence more ornamental than functional. Let Tyler take the lead, they'd say. Even when I had experience and he didn't. My mother called it a family tradition. My father called it structure. I called it suffocating. But I stayed quiet, because when you're raised to be the silent support beam, not the pillar in front, your absence is felt more than your voice ever was. And for a long time, I believed that was enough, until one wedding, one stolen moment, showed me just how invisible they believed I truly was. I thought graduating with a business degree from Reed would change things. That maybe, just maybe, they'd look at me differently, not as the older sibling who blended into the background, but as someone capable of leading. I'd spent 4 years working twice as hard, earning internships, building a portfolio, mastering the language of markets and margins, not because I needed to prove it to myself, but because I thought I had to prove it to them. When I joined Whitmore and Carter, it wasn't with illusions of special treatment. I didn't expect a corner office or champagne toasts. All I wanted was to contribute, strategize, develop campaigns, maybe modernize their stagnant branding. I had plans to bring in digital platforms, host community engagement events, shift the company's image from stiff tradition to smart innovation. But at every meeting, my ideas were redirected, repackaged, or worse, quietly ignored. "Let's stay focused on what's already working," my father would say, adjusting his cufflinks without looking up. Or, "That's interesting, Callan, but I don't think it aligns with the firm's tone." my mother would add, her voice sweet but final. Tyler, meanwhile, would toss out half-formed suggestions, some borrowed straight from my proposals, and they'd be received like revelations. After 6 months, I stopped raising my hand in meetings. After a year, I stopped going unless required. My title said marketing coordinator, but I was really there to smile at clients and fetch the coffee when our actual assistant was out sick. The day I left was unceremonious. No big blow-up, no dramatic confrontation, just a quiet meeting in my father's office. I told them I was resigning. My mother looked up from her phone long enough to say, "Marketing events is hardly a career. Callan, it's more of a hobby, really." My father didn't argue. He simply nodded and said, "If that's what you think you need to do, I won't stop you. But don't say we didn't offer you real opportunities." I didn't cry. Not then. I walked out with a cardboard box and the quiet clarity that comes when the thing you feared, being pushed out, is finally real and survivable. I moved to Silverfield, a quieter suburb east of Portland, and into a modest one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. The ceiling creaked when it rained. The kitchen faucet never stopped dripping. But it was mine, every inch of it, with no clients, no savings beyond my emergency fund, and no family support. I registered for a business license, printed basic flyers, and offered my services as an independent event coordinator. I said yes to everything: birthday parties, baby showers, and retirement luncheons. I learned how to stretch $500 into something that looked like $5,000. I cold-called venues, stayed up late researching vendors, carried folding tables and centerpieces across parking lots in the pouring rain. There were weeks when I lived on ramen and black coffee, when I doubted everything, when I checked my email 20 times an hour, praying for a single inquiry. But slowly, the inquiries came. Then came word-of-mouth referrals. A florist I'd once rescued from a catering disaster sent 3 brides my way. A non-profit client referred me to their board president's daughter. I began to be known, not for my last name, but for what I delivered: seamless events, under budget, on time. I wasn't making Whitmore money, but for the first time, I was building something that belonged to me. And yet, even in the freedom of this new life, I still caught myself craving their approval. I wondered if they'd ever call to ask how I was, wondering if they'd ever say, "We were wrong." They never did. But I was learning that building a life of your own sometimes means accepting silence in place of applause. And learning, slowly, that silence can still be power. By the time Tyler announced his engagement to Lillian Carter, I had been running my business for nearly 3 years. I wasn't wealthy by Whitmore standards, but I had stability. I had a purpose, and I had finally stopped holding my breath, waiting for my family to notice me. So when I received the dinner invitation to celebrate the engagement, I told myself it was just another family gathering. I would go, smile, be polite, nothing more. But from the moment I walked through the front door of our childhood home, the same one that never quite felt like mine, I could feel it: a shift in temperature, a tightening of the air. Lillian greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, her tones syrupy sweet. She was beautiful, poised, and effortless in the way that only someone born into money and expectations could be. Her parents owned a chain of boutique hotels stretching from Seattle to Savannah, the Whitmores and the Carters. As my mother put it later that evening, were a perfect match. 2 legacy families joining forces, a legacy merger wrapped in lace and monogrammed champagne flutes. Over roast duck and roasted figs, plans unfolded like blueprints: the venue, the dress, the 7-tier cake from a bakery in Napa. I sat at the end of the table, silent, watching it all swirl around me. No one asked what I thought. No one even glanced in my direction until my mother tilted her wine glass, smiled across the table, and said, "Callan, you'll be such a help." I didn't respond at first. I wasn't sure what she meant. She continued, "You know the best florists in Silverfield, and you've worked with some great photographers. Maybe you could handle some of the decorative details." Lillian chimed in, voice light but certain. "Yes, and maybe the welcome baskets for the hotel guests too. I saw something adorable with local honey and monogrammed soaps." She giggled, then added, "You're so organized. Callan, It would be such a gift to have someone like you involved. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a request. It was a placement. The way you'd place a vase on a mantel. By dessert, I had somehow agreed to coordinate floral design, guest baskets, lighting plans, and, eventually, the entire rehearsal dinner. The list grew week by week, expanding quietly like ivy, and every time I hesitated, my mother would tilt her head and say, "It's your brother's only wedding. Callan, don't be selfish." So I bit my tongue, and I wrote the checks. It started small: $400 for a custom seating chart, $600 for engraved place cards. Then came the deposit for the string quartet, the vendor meals, the personalized cocktail napkins with gold foil initials. It wasn't my wedding, but somehow it was my budget that bled. I told myself this was the price of being included. That maybe, if I poured myself into making their day perfect, they'd finally see me as someone who mattered. I told myself it was worth it. But somewhere deep down, beneath the diplomacy and the dutiful smiles, a quieter truth was growing. This wasn't inclusion, it was conscription. And I was no longer sure if what they saw in me was love, or simply utility. I wish I could say I set boundaries early, that I said no when the requests started piling up, that I pushed back when the costs began to eat into the savings I'd spent years rebuilding. But the truth is, at first, I said yes. I told myself it was family, that it mattered, that maybe this time, my contributions would mean something. It started with the florals. I had agreed to simple centerpieces, eucalyptus, ivory roses, and a few scattered candles. Then one afternoon at my parents' house, Lillian showed my mother a Pinterest board filled with suspended orchid installations, dozens of them, cascading from ceilings in luminous, white garlands. "Oh, Callan," my mother said, already enchanted. "This is what we were missing. It's elegant, sophisticated." Don't you think I hesitated? They're beautiful, but that's a completely different budget. Easily triple what we planned. Lillian pouted slightly. But it would be so meaningful. And you know how much this day means to Tyler and me. She didn't say it cruelly. She didn't have to. Within 24 hours, I was on the phone negotiating rush quotes from 3 florists. The floral upgrade led to a new lighting scheme, then upgraded table linens, then gold-rimmed glassware. Every time I tried to suggest a simpler alternative, my mother would say, "Callan, don't be petty. This is your brother's only wedding." When I pointed out the budget again, she replied, "You run a business. You'll bounce back. Stop acting like this is a hardship." I told myself it was temporary, that the money would stretch, but it didn't. By mid-July, I had paid the photographer's retainer, the deposit for the Marigold's reception hall, the bakery upgrade, the violinist who would play during cocktail hour. Then came the welcome baskets for 120 guests, each filled with custom mugs, gourmet chocolates, and hand-poured candles. When I suggested trimming the list, my mother simply said, "These guests expect a certain level of hospitality. We're not sending them home with dollar store trinkets." The tipping point came the day I was asked, no, expected, to front the remaining venue balance for the Marigold. I blinked, stunned. I thought Dad was handling that. He was, my mother said breezily. But the deal on the Cambridge property got delayed. Just bad timing. We'll reimburse you. Of course. That of course carried the same weight as a paper promise in the rain. But I paid it anyway. Because I couldn't stand the idea of being the reason something fell through. Samantha, my best friend, my lifeline, met me for coffee the next day. I vented in whispers, half out of embarrassment, half out of habit. "They're using you," she said quietly, her spoon stirring with agitation. "And they know it." I opened my mouth to defend them, but there was nothing left to say. They hadn't thanked me. Not once. My mother had called my vendor suggestions uninspired. My father hadn't spoken more than 2 sentences to me in weeks. Tyler, meanwhile, texted twice, both times asking for my opinion on honeymoon resorts. They didn't see me. Not really. I was a line item in their budget, a silent partner in a wedding that wasn't mine. And as the invoices piled up on my kitchen table, and the bank balance dwindled beneath numbers that used to make me feel safe, I started to wonder if what I'd been seeking all along, belonging, appreciation, simple acknowledgement, was never part of their design. Maybe it never had been. The night before the wedding. The marigold was hushed but not quiet. The ballroom shimmered under soft amber lights. Half-dressed tables waiting like guests not yet told where to sit. I stood at the center of it all, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, directing crews, calming vendors, adjusting timelines that had unraveled more times than I could count. By 11:30, most of the staff had gone home. The floral team finished the final suspended orchid garlands, and the catering staff had completed their prep in the back kitchen. I was alone, walking between the tables one last time, smoothing linens, straightening place cards, adjusting the candle heights so they'd all burn evenly. No one asked me to do it, but no one else would. My dress for the next day was still in the garment bag, untouched. I hadn't had time for a fitting. I hadn't scheduled my own makeup artist. At some point, I realized I hadn't eaten since noon. I sat briefly in one of the velvet chairs, staring at the ivory and blush decor I had paid for, designed and executed to perfection, only to realize I had no seat of my own. I wasn't listed on the formal seating chart. My mother had said they'd find a spot for me. Closer to the back, near the family friends, at 12:07 a.m., just as I was shutting off the ballroom lights, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother: don't forget to pick up gluten-free breakfast for Lillian's mom. 7:00 a.m. sharp. Nothing with dairy or seeds. X. No thank you for tonight. No get some sleep. Just a reminder. A directive. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard, unsure if I wanted to scream or laugh. I was organizing a 6-figure wedding, paying for a third of it, and now I was also the breakfast delivery girl. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked back into the ballroom and turned the lights on again. It was beautiful, undeniably so. The cascading orchids, the gold-rimmed chargers, the custom signage I'd printed at midnight 2 nights earlier. Every detail was flawless, an image straight from a magazine. But as I stood there alone, in a space I had helped build from the ground up, I didn't feel proud. I felt erased. It was like watching someone else's dream come to life using your hands, your money, your time, while you were kept just far enough out of the frame to be forgotten. I walked up the steps to the stage where the band would perform and looked out at the sea of empty chairs. Tomorrow, those chairs will be filled with guests, family, strangers in designer suits, and none of them would know what it had taken to make this happen. They'd see the photos, they'd toast the couple, they'd applaud the Whitmores for their generosity and grace, and I'd be somewhere near the coat check, answering calls about table changes or tracking down someone's missing place card. At that moment, a thought came to me, quiet and sharp, like a pinprick under the skin. I wasn't part of this story. I was the crew, and maybe I always had been. As I turned off the lights for the second time and locked up the ballroom, I felt the full weight of that truth settle on my shoulders. Heavier than the clipboard, heavier than the garlands, heavier than the cost. I wasn't setting the stage for a celebration. I was setting the stage for my own invisibility. The morning of the wedding arrived cloaked in golden autumn light, crisp air, sunlight slicing through tree branches, and everything outside calm in a way that felt almost cruel. By 6:00 a.m., I was already on the road, coffee in one hand, gluten-free breakfast order for Lillian's mother in the passenger seat. Nothing with dairy, nothing with seeds. No one had asked if I'd slept. At the Marigold. The venue buzzed with quiet urgency. I moved through hallways with practiced precision, checking in with the florist, confirming with the caterer, tracking the makeup artist's arrival. My phone rang, buzzed, vibrated. I answered each one, smiled through every fire. I didn't get dressed until 20 minutes before the ceremony. Slipped into a navy wrap dress in the venue bathroom, hair still pinned from the night before. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Drawn eyes, a tired mouth, but still standing. The ceremony itself was perfect. The chapel glowed with candlelight. Lillian floated down the aisle in her Vera Wang, a string quartet weaving music like silk around the pews. Tyler actually cried, and for a second, standing at the back near the last row of guests, I felt something like pride. Until I remembered. I was the only one standing. No seat had been reserved for me. At the reception, The room shimmered under the suspended orchid garlands. Everyone raved about the decor. Breathtaking. Someone said near the bar, exactly like those bridal magazines. I passed by just in time to hear my mother say, flute of champagne in hand, we wanted something unforgettable. I designed most of it myself. The orchids were my idea. Of course, not a word about me. Not a word about the weeks I'd spent orchestrating every bloom, every vendor, every invoice. Later, I found myself seated at table 12 far from the wedding party, tucked beside distant cousins and one of Lillian's sorority friends. My salmon was overcooked. No one noticed. Tyler passed by once, glass raised in a lazy toast. Hey, thanks for all the stuff. Cal, Lillian's really happy. Then he disappeared into another photo op. By 9:00 p.m., the music swelled, the dance floor filled, and I slipped away for a few minutes of quiet. The hotel had given us a small office to store our belongings. I stepped inside to find my bag, hoping for Advil and 5 minutes of silence. The door was ajar. That's when I heard them. My mother's voice first. Low and certain it's already done. She'll never even notice. Then Tyler's I don't know. Mom, Callan's already spent so much. A pause. Then Elaine again. Sharper now. Don't be ridiculous. Tyler. It's just sitting in her account doing nothing. This way. It benefits the whole family. Now get back to your wife before she wonders where you've gone. I froze. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. When they exited the room, I stepped back into the shadows, heart pounding in my throat. I waited until the hallway cleared, then walked back into the office. My purse was still where I'd left it. My phone, untouched. Or so I thought. A terrible possibility crept in, one I didn't want to believe, but deep down, something in me already knew. They had taken from me, not just time, not just effort, but something real, tangible, mine. And they did it while I was working to make their celebration flawless. While I was breaking my back to honor a family that never once paused to ask if I was okay. The theft wasn't loud. It was quiet, intentional, and it would be the last time they mistook my silence for permission. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I lay on the couch in my apartment, shoes still on, staring at the ceiling while my mind played that conversation over and over again. She'll never even notice. Those words rang louder than the music had all evening. I had noticed. Not just the missing thank yous, not just the silence, but now, something concrete, something stolen, at dawn. I made coffee, strong and bitter, and opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account, pulse ticking in my ears. There it was, a transaction, time-stamped 9:17 p.m., the exact moment I'd been locked in a bathroom stall crying behind mascara-smudged eyes. Transfer to Elaine Whitmore, amount $8,400, memo wedding. My hands were cold. I clicked refresh 3 times, hoping it was a glitch. It wasn't. I hadn't authorized anything. I hadn't even touched my phone. I called the bank, after too many prompts and long holds. A representative came on the line. I explained the situation, calmly at first, then with more urgency. He reviewed the transfer. It appears the transaction was completed via your mobile banking app. Miss Whitmore, using your credentials, fingerprint or PIN authorization. My fingerprint is secure, I said. My PIN, it's my brother's birthday. There was silence on the other end. That would explain how access might have been gained, the rep said cautiously. You mentioned your phone was unattended. I closed my eyes. During the reception, I left my clutch at the head table while running around solving problems. Anyone could have taken it. Anyone who knew me well enough to guess the passcode. And only one person would have known what that money meant to me. After the call ended, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I opened a folder on my desktop and labeled it Theft, October 22nd. Inside it, I began collecting screenshots, the transfer confirmation. My text exchanges with vendors showed I was away from my phone. Messages to the band leader at 9:08 p.m. and again to the venue coordinator at 9:25 p.m. My banking app required either biometric or PIN verification, neither of which I had entered. They had taken more than money. They'd taken trust. I called Samantha next. She listened in stunned silence as I told her everything. Then, without hesitation, she said, "You need to talk to Archer." Dr. Archer Bell was a friend of hers from law school. He worked in family and financial abuse cases. Someone who'd seen too many stories like mine, dressed in different packaging. He met me that same afternoon at a quiet cafe off Hawthorne. I showed him everything. He didn't interrupt, didn't talk over me, just took notes and nodded slowly as I spoke. "This is theft," he said simply when I finished. "Unauthorized access, fraud. And given the financial pressure they placed on you before this, we're looking at a clear pattern of exploitation." He laid out my options. I could file a police report. I could send a demand letter. I could even pursue civil litigation. But more than that, he asked me the real question, the one no one had ever bothered to ask. "What do you want?" "Callan." The answer came more easily than I expected. "I want my money back. And I want them to know I saw what they did, that I won't stay silent anymore." So we drafted the letter together, formally written, legally sound, emotionally restrained. It demanded the full return of the $8,400 plus documentation of reimbursement for prior expenses I'd covered totaling $22,786. Failure to comply would result in legal escalation, including police involvement. I signed it, initialed every page, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small when I did. That evening, I placed the envelope on my nightstand. Tomorrow, I would walk back into that house, not as the forgotten daughter, not as the silent helper, but as someone they couldn't ignore anymore. The Whitmore house looked the same as it always had: immaculate hedges, a brick walkway swept clean of every fallen leaf, windows gleaming with silent judgment. But something in me had shifted. I didn't come that morning to ask questions. I came with answers, and this time, I wasn't leaving them behind. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, watching my own reflection in the windshield. Navy blazer, pressed trousers, hair pinned back. I looked like someone ready for a boardroom, not a brunch. But this wasn't breakfast. It was a reckoning. The housekeeper opened the door and gestured politely toward the sunroom. Inside, the sound of clinking glasses and polite laughter floated through the air, mimosas in hand. My parents were chatting with Lillian's family, recounting the previous night's success as though it had all magically materialized. "Callan," my mother said with a smile. "Just a trace too bright. We were about to start without you. Come get a plate." I offered a nod and sat down, plate untouched, pulse steady. I waited, let them talk, let them settle. And when the moment finally came, when my mother raised a glass to toast a beautiful beginning for our family, I cleared my throat. "Speaking of beginnings," I said calmly, "I noticed something strange when I checked my bank account this morning. The room didn't fall silent, but it stalled." My father glanced up from his newspaper. Tyler looked down into his coffee. My mother tilted her head. "What do you mean?" she asked, voice smooth. "There was a transfer last night, $8,400, from my account to yours." "Mom." Lillian's parents stiffened. Someone's fork hit the edge of their plate. My mother blinked. "I don't recall." "Are you sure it wasn't part of the wedding reimbursements?" "No," I said, pulling out the folder. "It was made at 9:17 p.m. while I was putting out fires in the ballroom. I wasn't near my phone, and I didn't authorize it." My father set down his glass slowly. "Perhaps this isn't the time." "Callan, if not now." When I said, still calm, "When I'm no longer around to overhear how little I'm supposed to notice." My mother's voice sharpened. "You're being dramatic. This is family. The money went to cover an essential honeymoon upgrade, a detail you wouldn't cover, because I already contributed $22,000, I replied. "From my savings. For my brother's wedding. Without complaint. Without credit. And then you took more." Tyler looked up sharply. "Wait, you paid that much?" Lillian turned to him, confusion clear on her face. "I thought your parents covered everything. Your mom said Callan just wanted to use the wedding as a business portfolio." "I have receipts," I said, placing the file on the table, "for everything. The floral installations, the vendor meals, the upgraded cocktail hour, all me." My father reached for the folder, scanning the pages. His face darkened. "I heard you," I continued, looking straight at my mother. "Last night, in the office, you told Tyler, She'll never even notice. But I did. My mother stiffened. You're going to humiliate us in front of guests. Threaten your own family over a misunderstanding. This isn't a misunderstanding, I said, voice still low. It's theft. The room was frozen. Lillian stood slowly. I had no idea, she whispered. None, if I'd known. She turned toward my mother, cheeks flushed. You lied. You used her and you lied. My father cleared his throat. Formal now. Elaine, is this true? She looked at him, then at Tyler, who wouldn't meet her gaze. I transferred the money, she said finally, because no one else would, and she was being difficult. No, Tyler said quietly. She was doing everything, and we let her. My mother opened her mouth, but my father raised a hand. This is serious. It crosses a line, and it ends now. I reached into my bag and slid the envelope across the table. This is a formal demand for the return of funds, including the unauthorized transaction, if it's not resolved in 48 hours. The police report will be filed. My mother looked stunned. My father nodded once. Tyler whispered, I'm sorry. And for the first time, they were no longer speaking at me. They were listening, because I wasn't asking anymore. I was holding them accountable. For a long moment, no one spoke. The envelope sat in the center of the table, untouched but undeniably present, like a storm cloud finally recognized after years of pretending it was just mist. My mother's posture stiffened. Her hands, usually so composed, fidgeted near her mimosa glass. My father flipped slowly through the documents, receipts, timelines, correspondence, his silence more weighted than any scolding. Then he looked up. Elaine, he said quietly, but firmly. You need to return all of it. Her expression faltered. George, she's exaggerating. This wasn't theft. It was unauthorized. He cut in. And it wasn't just the 8,000. It was everything. $22,786. To be exact. He said the number as if it tasted bitter in his mouth. We'll return it, he added, turning to me. All of it, with interest, if needed. Across the table. Lillian reached for Tyler's hand. He looked shaken, less from the confrontation, I think, and more from realizing just how much he hadn't seen. I didn't know, he said to me, voice low, about the money, about how much you gave up. I should have asked. I should have paid attention. It's not just about the money, I said, quieter now. It's how no one thought to ask, how I was expected to give, without being seen. Lillian nodded. We'll make this right. If there's anything left unpaid, anything that needs covering, please tell us. You shouldn't have carried all of this alone. My mother looked between them, her face tightening, not with defiance, but with something closer to embarrassment, or perhaps fear, for the first time, that she had finally gone too far. You've always been dramatic, she muttered, still clinging to the script that had served her for years, always making things bigger than they are. And you've always made my worth conditional, I replied, without raising my voice, on how useful I could be, how quiet I could stay. There was no heat in my tone, only truth. And this time, it landed. Her shoulders slumped. A pause. Then, in a voice thin but audible, she said, I took the money, without permission. That was wrong. It wasn't an apology, not the kind most people would recognize, but it was the closest she had ever come to admitting fault, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to beg for it. My father stood. We'll handle the transfer today, he said, before placing a hand on my shoulder. And I'm sorry. Callan, I should have paid more attention. I should have protected you. I felt the words settle in my chest like something warm and unfamiliar. I nodded. Thank you. There were still too many things unsaid, too many cracks beneath the surface. But in that moment, I wasn't the afterthought. I wasn't the support beam holding up someone else's celebration. I was someone they had to answer to. And for the first time, they did. The money appeared in my account that evening. Every cent. The $8,400 taken without my consent. The $22,786 I had quietly drained from my savings in the months leading up to the wedding. And even a small note attached from my father, with interest. And with regret. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to. It wasn't about the numbers. It was about what they finally represented: acknowledgement. But acknowledgement isn't healing, and return isn't repair. The silence after confrontation is strange. There were no calls from my mother. Only a formal email from my father confirming the transfer and suggesting we take time before continuing further discussion. Tyler texted a few times, awkward, apologetic, unsure of what to say beyond "I should have done better." And yet, even as the house grew quiet, my thoughts didn't. They churned louder than ever. Samantha was the one who gently nudged me toward therapy. "You've been surviving for so long," she said one evening over tea. "Maybe it's time you gave yourself space to understand what you've survived." I made an appointment with Dr. Holloway the next morning. In our first session, I tried to explain everything quickly, like I was recapping a movie, rushing to the climax. She listened without interruption, her expression calm, curious, never pitying. And then she asked me something that stopped me cold. "Callan, when did you first learn that love had to be earned?" That question echoed through every session after. Together, we unraveled the invisible contract my family had signed for me. Be useful, be quiet, be agreeable, and you'll be allowed to stay. I had been the dependable daughter, the invisible glue, the convenient extension of their ambition, and I had learned to measure my value not by who I was, but by how well I could serve. Dr. Holloway called it a classic scapegoat role. "In families like yours," she said, "one child is elevated to carry legacy, the other carries silence." I had carried it for too long. So I began to rewrite the script. 3 months after the wedding, I filed the paperwork to rebrand my business, a boutique events company, with a mission not just for elegance, but for integrity. I rewrote my service agreements, added clauses that protected my time, and quietly began saying no to clients who crossed boundaries. My new motto was simple: extraordinary moments don't require extraordinary self-sacrifice. And I meant it. With my savings restored, I had the luxury, and the right, to be more selective. I chose clients who valued collaboration, not control, couples who wanted to create joy, not perfection, organizations that respected deadlines, budgets, and boundaries. I wasn't chasing applause anymore. I didn't need 5-star reviews to feel worthy. I didn't need my mother's approval, or Tyler's recognition, or my father's quiet pride. What I needed, what I had built, was a life that reflected who I was, not who they told me I had to be. Some days were harder than others. Old habits tug at you like old sweaters. They still fit, even if they no longer serve. But each morning I woke up and chose myself, not because it was loud, not because it was easy, but because, for the first time, I knew I didn't need to prove my place in anyone's story. I was writing my own. 2 months after the wedding, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen on the screen since the confrontation. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Hi, Callan, it's your mother." Her voice was careful, composed, but not cold. There was something new in her tone: uncertainty, maybe, or restraint, for the first time. She wasn't calling to assign a task or deliver a judgment. "We've been reflecting," she began. "Your father and I, we've started seeing someone, a therapist. She's helped us look at things we hadn't seen clearly before." I stayed silent, letting her speak. "She says we've operated in patterns, that we've been unfair to you." It wasn't quite an apology, but from Elaine Whitmore, it was a tectonic shift. "I'm finding it difficult," she added after a beat. "But I'm trying. We both are." I didn't rush to fill the pause. I'd spent my whole life softening her discomfort. That day, I let the silence breathe. "I appreciate you telling me," I said gently. "I've been seeing someone too. It's helped." Before we hung up, she hesitated again. "I was wondering if someday you'd consider joining us for a session." "When you're ready, I'll consider it," I said. And for the first time in years, I meant it. A week later, I received a dinner invitation from Tyler and Lillian. Just me. No expectation, no family agenda, just dinner in their apartment on the edge of Laurelhurst. When I arrived, the table was already set. Candles flickered gently. Music played low. "I've been thinking," Tyler said as we sat down, about how easy it was to let things happen, to let Mom and Dad shape the story. He looked at me, this time without defense. I should have protected you better. Lillian reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. We both should have, she said. And we want you to know, this is your place too. In this home, your voice matters. Their sincerity caught me off guard. It didn't erase the years, but it chipped away at the silence between us. And so, when Thanksgiving came around, I made a choice I hadn't made before. I declined the formal Whitmore dinner and accepted Samantha's invitation to spend the holiday with her family at their lake house in Silverfield. It was nothing like the Thanksgivings I had known. There were mismatched chairs and too much pie. Her brothers argued about football. Her mother insisted on taking 10 family photos. None of them posed. Her grandmother, Nana Ruth, made me wear a paper crown from a cracker and told me I looked like the queen of second chances. For the first time. I laughed without checking the room first. That evening, after dinner, I stood by the window of the guest room, wrapped in a blanket, looking out at the lake. The reflection of the moon rippled across the surface, soft and imperfect, behind me. I could hear laughter from the kitchen, the clatter of dishes, the hum of real connection. It was warmth I didn't have to earn, love I didn't have to negotiate. And in that quiet, flickering light, I realized I had stopped waiting for my family to change all at once. Some repairs take time, some people grow slowly, but the difference now was that I wasn't frozen in place, hoping for permission. I had stepped outside the frame and found something far more beautiful. 2 weeks before Christmas, I signed the paperwork and placed a deposit on a condo just outside Silverfield. A modest 2-bedroom with a small balcony, morning light in the kitchen, and a quiet view of pine trees instead of traffic. It wasn't extravagant, it wasn't a statement, but it was mine, chosen by me, for me. No one else had opinions about the curtains. No one weighed in on the paint colors. I didn't ask for approval. I didn't need to. For the first time, I was building a space that reflected who I was, not who I was told to be. When the invitation came from my parents to attend Christmas Eve dinner, I didn't avoid it. I didn't accept it blindly either. I replied clearly I would come for the evening, but I wouldn't be staying overnight. I had other plans for the morning, and this time, that was enough. The house looked the same. High ceilings, a table set like a magazine spread, garland draped perfectly across the staircase banister. But I walked in differently. My steps weren't hesitant. My spine didn't curve to accommodate the room. I was present, not to please, but to witness. My mother offered her usual observations. Your dress is simple, but elegant. You could have brought a dessert with a bit more flair. I smiled, not forced, not bitter. Just still. I like simple, I replied gently. Not everything needs to be dressed up to matter. She blinked, paused, then nodded once and moved on. My father asked about my business, and this time he listened. Tyler poured wine and let me finish my stories without interruption. Lillian pulled me aside before dessert to say thank you again, for everything, for coming, for staying true to myself. And I did stay true. I didn't stay late. I didn't get pulled into cleanup. I left with my coat buttoned, my dignity intact, and no weight in my chest. Just the quiet knowledge that I had done something generations of women before me never got the chance to do. I redefined what family meant. On my own terms. It wasn't about rejection, it was about return. But this time, the return was to myself, to my peace, to my place in the world, not handed down, not borrowed, but earned in silence, built with boundaries, and held with grace. And that was more than enough. I bought my own home. I built a business on my terms, and I stopped asking for permission to exist. Family, I've learned, isn't defined by obligation, it's defined by respect. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is say enough. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been expected to give more than you had to people who never once said thank you, you're not alone. Leave a comment if this resonates. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries, reclaiming your worth, and becoming the version of yourself no one saw coming.